All right, now it's time to dive into one of my favorite topics, loops. I love being able to run some chunk of code just over and over again. It's amazing how fast computers can do things. So let's go ahead and give ourselves some space here. But before we do, I'm going to keep the dog names here, this little list that we have, because we're going to use it with for loops. So I'm going to show you first how to use for loops with a list, but then how you can also do it without a list. I just think it's so cool how for loops in Python work with lists. So if you want to loop through everything inside of a list, you can use a for loop to do that. You say for space and then give a name for whatever the thing is that you want to be looping through. So if I'm looping through a bunch of dog names, I might call as I loop through each of them, maybe it's a dog, right? This is like the singular version of dog names. So I might say for dog, and then you say space in dog names, in case you're saying, okay, for each thing in dog names, I'm going to be calling each of those things dogs. Then you do a colon, then again, just like we did with if statements, just like we did with functions, like we're going to get, again, indent over to say, okay, anything that's indented here, this is all the stuff that's inside of the for loop. So if I wanted to, I could print out each of the dog names here. I can just say print, and then I specified the name here as dog, so I'm going to just say dog. And check this out. Go ahead and run our code. Boom, it printed out Fido, Sean, Sally, Mark. And it just did that over and over again. So this is a way to kind of loop through each thing inside of a list if you want to. Now let's say you don't have a list, but you just want to loop through and run some chunk of code a certain amount of times. You can do that too. Instead of giving the name here of some list, you can change this to say range. Okay, and then you do parentheses and specify what you want that range to be. So I might say 1, 10, like this. And if you can choose if you want to use something here or not. If you don't want to, you can just use some like an underscore to say I'm not really going to be using this. But you might say something like X to say, okay, for each number that I'm looping through, I'm going to do this. And just for the sake of this example, I'm going to print out X here, and we'll hit save. Go ahead and run this. You can see it printed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now it's important to note that it didn't get all the way to the number 10. You'll see if we put in like the number 5 right here, so 5, 10 for our range. Go ahead and hit run here. You can see it doesn't get to that last number. So, if I said, for example, 1, 1, okay, go ahead and run this. Doesn't show up anytime, right? Like that, you have to do kind of like one more than you're hoping for to get to in that range. And the reason for this is it works really nice with lists, that zero-based index stuff, where you could just put the length of a list here if you wanted to loop through all that information. Now, so what's really cool though, and the thing that I love about ranges is you can just get to really, really big numbers really quickly. Like that might be a bit much, but if I go ahead and run this, you can see, whoa, it just printed out like, what was this, 100,000 numbers, one shy of that. But you can just keep on tacking numbers onto this thing and just it just goes and goes and goes and goes. Now this is going to take forever to finish, so I'm going to go ahead and do Control C here to end that. So I will talk about one more type of loop in Python, and that's the while loop. So a while loop, basically you just say while space and then give it some sort of Boolean. You can give it a comparison, which ultimately ends up like a Boolean. For example, if I say age is equal to 0 and say as long as age is less than 18, and you do the colon here, and now anything that's inside or indented is inside of this while loop. It's saying, okay, while this thing here is true, keep looping through this thing until all of a sudden this thing is not true, and then at that point break out of the while loop. So for example, if we say inside of here, okay, print whatever age is, and then we're going to say age plus equals 1. This plus equal is just a way to say, okay, it's essentially the same thing as saying age is equal to age plus 1, but kind of the shorter hand way to do this is just to say plus equals. But if we go ahead and run this back to our terminal here, you can see it starts at 0 and waits until it gets to 18, at which point when it's 18 it says, okay, age is not less than 18, so I'm done with this, I'm going to break out of the while loop. So you got to be careful with the while loops, because for example, if I forgot to put here to say age is plus equals to 1 or whatever, and I run this code, it's going to get stuck and just run this forever and ever and ever, and probably eventually your computer's going to crash. So Again, Control C to end that. This can be a way if you really want to get up to some big number, like I'm going to bring back that age +1, but say, well, this is under some huge number, and I hit save and run this, boom, it's like off to the races and going. But again, you might think, well, it's better for me to do that in a for loop. You just might find some situations where this is better. I mean, a really common place is like in gaming, and you have like a game while loop to say while the person's still alive or this game is running, you want to check these different things. But you're probably not going to be making very many games in your Django websites. But there you have both types of loops, the for loops and the while loops. We're getting close to the end here. Hopefully you're starting to feel confident with Python and are ready to dive into making some websites.